Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on today's Solo Flight Special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, because there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, as I am sure you are all aware, Monday marked that pivotal turning point in the 2016 presidential election process when the Hawkeye state of Iowa's caucus goers showed up in record number to voice their support for Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz. They made their decision, and it was quite clear. He won convincingly. Now, however, his chief rival, New York real estate mogul, businessman, and billionaire Donald J. Trump, is causing and stirring up controversy in the aftermath of the Iowa caucus voters' determination. He is now demanding that the gutless opposition party, or GOP, come together and disqualify Cruz because he elicited fraudulent practices to steal votes from their mutual rival, retired neurosurgeon from Florida, Dr. Ben Carson. Now, folks, this all stemmed from a CNN report that was put out approximately 15 minutes before caucus voting was to begin in Iowa. It seemed to suggest that Dr. Carson was planning on making a major announcement the following week and would not be attending New Hampshire or some of the various other primary states that were pending, and that seemed to suggest that he was contemplating perhaps dropping out of the race. Now, multiple caucus goers, either for the Rubio camp and even Donald J. Trump's camp and the Cruz camp, went forward and tried to pressure some of Carson's caucus goers to switch sides, because if he was about to drop out of the race, then maybe it would mean that their vote would count for something as opposed to nothing. Now, granted, perhaps this is a underhanded tactic, but it is one that is employed by all of the candidates involved, and the selective outrage that has been directed towards Cruz seems consolidated, as if it is an attempt to bring him down because of his stalwart position when it comes to constitutional originalism and to pure conservatism. If there is one thing that we can say about the real estate tycoon Donald J. Trump, it's that he is not a consistent conservative. In fact, Jeremy and I have oft-times reiterated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer that Donald J. Trump is actually consistently inconsistent. That is a fact that we need to keep in mind, because he is trying to once again garner all of this media attention to center around himself, irrespective of the harm that it will cause to the gutless opposition party's image. Not that I am all that concerned with the gutless opposition party, but I am concerned with the election cycle going forward. This is a pivotal turning point in our history, and we have to make a firm decision about whether this country is going to continue to further divorce itself from the natural law tenets that underpin our shared Constitution, and indeed from our Constitution itself. Now, I have oft-times stated that that is the major problem that is facing the United States of America right now. Every issue that faces us, politically speaking, can be traced back to a departure from the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. It is a fact that cannot be ignored, but it is something that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are doing their utmost to ignore, sweep under the rug, and to obfuscate the truth from the true popular sovereigns in this country, we the people. Now, with respect to the attack that has been levied against Senator Cruz by Donald J. Trump, it's two-pronged. First, we have this idea that he stole from Dr. Ben Carson these votes that were pivotal, supposedly. Now, this is disregarding the fact that Dr. Carson actually performed stronger in the caucuses after the announcement was made by CNN than before, and so I find that to be rather dubious in nature with respect to Donald Trump's contention here. Secondly, we know that other candidates, including Donald J. Trump himself, have utilized that during the caucus voting in an attempt to persuade Carson's caucus voters to switch sides. That's just part of politics, folks. It is an adversarial system. It always has been, and it always will be. If we are to be an open, representative Republican form of government, that is a necessary part of the process in totality. Nevertheless, we see that Donald Trump is trying to say that the vote of the Iowa caucus goers doesn't matter. That because he, once again, didn't get his way, he was going to throw a Trumper tantrum, to steal a phrase from Ted Cruz, in order to get his way. That is the sort of childish, sociopathic behavior that we see exhibited by the current occupier of the White House. And do we really want to return to that when we have seen the direct and devastating consequences of 2 terms from such an individual? So, I think that the Iowa caucus goers made their determination, and we should not be seeking to destroy their determination. We should not silence the voters. That is their fundamental and unalienable right, as per the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Remember that what we have always said here on the Wright Flyer is that if you are going to use any measure to determine whether a candidate is qualified or not to wield the reins of political power in this great country of ours, the only litmus test you should use is the Constitution of the United States. It is because that defines who we are as a people, as to what our proper scope and application of government is, and it tells us exactly what we need to know about what would make this country operate smoothly, efficiently, and above all, legally. And, as I have stated, my reason for endorsing Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz rests around his unwavering commitment to the natural law tenets and the fundamental principles of our shared Constitution. Remember, folks, that the Constitution of the United States belongs to we the people. It does not belong to the government, nor does it belong to the respective or individual candidates. It may belong to them and does belong to them in so much as they are citizens of the United States, but they do not have carte blanche to make changes or to divorce this country from the Constitution. So, we see that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are doing their utmost to obfuscate the truth, to throw controversy up, to confuse the people, and to distract them from the truth that's actually apparent for everyone to see. And that truth of which I speak is that the American people are sick and tired of politics as usual. The so-called establishment candidates, which I do have a problem with that term, I prefer to call them either the detente wing of the gutless opposition party or the Fabian socialists of the Democrat Party, the people are tired of them. They lie to us, they steal our money, they make all of these grandiose promises which they never keep, nor did they ever intend to keep. The people are tired of that, because this country is being driven to the brink of ruination and complete and total destruction. So we, the American people, are voicing our opinion, and now, because it went against the bloated ego of the New York real estate tycoon, businessman, and billionaire, he's going to throw that little tantrum in order to have their votes quashed, or to have a recount. You know, folks, if you go back to the 2000 election, there was a similar reaction from another candidate. That candidate was Albert Gore Jr. His opponent, George W. Bush. Now, George W. Bush was not the committed constitutional conservative that we would like or we would have liked him to be. That said, the tactics that are being exhibited by Donald J. Trump are eerily reminiscent to the complaints that were lobbed forth by none other than Al Gore. That was a particularly bitter and contentious episode in American history. But we know what the results were, and I have a feeling that the results in this will be the same. In so much as Donald Trump is just not going to get his way on this. In fact, I think he's starting to hurt his credibility with the people. If he is such a tough guy, and that has been the image that he has been building for himself and portraying to the American electorate, then why would this bother him? You see, that's the thing. He's not as tough as he claims he is. He is not forthright and truthful about just exactly who he is or what his goals are for this country. Irrespective of this fact, it is gaining traction with Pavlov's school of journalism. The salivating mainstream media wants to push this story forward. They want there to be contention. It's all about entertainment and ratings. You see, folks, it's basically devolving into a poorly scripted soap opera, and I believe that the American people deserve far better than this. Now, the other part of Donald J. Trump's attack against Ted Cruz revolves around a contentious type of campaign literature that was circulated by not only Ted Cruz's camp, but also by Marco Rubio's camp and Donald J. Trump's camp. These are the so-called voter-shaming mailers. And we see that Donald Trump and some of his cheerleaders, which includes Jerry Rivers Geraldo Rivera, the failed news anchor whose claim to fame was finding Al Capone's empty vault in Chicago, and also divulging top-secret troop movements in front of live audiences everywhere by drawing a line in the sand in Afghanistan. If ever there was someone whose credibility was shot, it ought to be Jerry Rivers Geraldo Rivera. Now, this attorney, Mr. Rivera, not only agrees with Ann Coulter that Ted Cruz is disqualified from seeking the highest office in the land because he is supposedly not a natural-born citizen, which we've already debunked on past episodes of the Wright Flyer. In fact, the greatest legal minds in the United States would agree with me. It goes to Statutory Construction 101, what every law student learns within their first year of law school. But he also is now claiming that this is a simple misdemeanor. This putting out of official-looking documents, which are not, and he claims that that is a misdemeanor at the very least. Now, what he's speaking to actually goes to the Iowa State Code. Iowa State Code, Section 720.5, states false representation of records or process. Any person who represents any document or paper to be any public record or any civil or criminal process when the person knows such representation to be false commits a simple misdemeanor. Now, all of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media think they have an aha gotcha moment here. They think that they can sink their claws into Ted Cruz and completely discredit him, while all the time ignoring Marco Rubio's even more aggressive mailers of this sort, El Jefe Jeb Bush's even more aggressive mailers of this category, and yes, even Donald J. Trump's mailers of this category. But the problem is, if you actually look on the back of the envelope, there is a statement. Granted, it is in smaller typeface than the rest of the information that says that it is campaign material. We all see these types of mailers sent out either by credit card companies, insurance companies, or what have you, saying that, look, you can refinance your debt, or important financial information, or important information contained within, do not throw away, that sort of thing. It may be devious. It may not be the greatest decision that was ever made by the Cruz camp in Iowa, but it is not illegal because the disclaimer is there. It's clear to see, and a reasonable person would see it. Either way, Jerry Rivers Geraldo Rivera continues to want to make political hay out of this and has doubled down on his efforts to claim that Cruz has committed a misdemeanor. I mean, it was his entire talking point that he reiterated time and again on yesterday's The Five. And that's that Fox News program that has those 5 people, and they were all whining and complaining about Ted Cruz because, as we all know, Fox News is in bed with the Rubio camp. I mean, it is biased reporting at its absolute worst. But let's go to a true case coming out of Iowa. This is Iowa Supreme Court v. Mattson, which was decided in 1997, and it goes around that particular case, or that particular code section, 720.5 of the Iowa Code. And basically this was an attorney that was submitting false subpoenas to convince people to provide evidence that they wouldn't otherwise in order to help a client. And yes, he was found to have violated this and was disbarred because of that. Now, it's important to distinguish that this was a civil proceeding, but I'm going to approach it as a misdemeanor or criminal proceeding because that is the framework in which Geraldo presented it to the viewing public of the Fox News channel. So let's go ahead and delve into this. The first thing that we need to talk about is the proof, the burden of proof and the standard of review, which is basically how the court will examine the case and the standard that it must be met with. And because this is a criminal case, it would be the burden of beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, folks, that is the highest burden of proof that one can have in the courts. It goes to say that if there is any reason to doubt the charges, then the charges cannot stand, because you are attempting to act upon the fundamental and unalienable rights of the accused. In this case, it would be a free speech issue, in a sense. But anyway, we would have to meet that standard, and then it would have to be material, meaning that it would have to have had some major implication. And because people have been exposed to these sorts of mailers, legally speaking, I don't think there is a major implication here whatsoever. And so let's go to the proof of a violation of the code. You have to specifically show that there is a violation, and that the violation is completely dishonest. Well, the problem is you've already got the disclaimer on the literature which shows that it is not within the line of being beyond a reasonable doubt a fraudulent misstatement of fact or a fraudulent presentation of an official document. This is just shocking, because we have seen that the Secretary of State for the state of Iowa was going out on a limb to support their Governor Branstad, with respect to Cruz, because they got rid of their veil of objectivity and neutrality, refusing to interfere with the voting, and said that the caucus voters shouldn't support Cruz because of his stance on the ethanol subsidies. And why should the American electorate be expected to pay for the Iowa's use of ethanol. That should be dictated by the private market. And in fact, I think that the people and farmers of Iowa would be far better off if we allowed the free market to handle the situation. Again, that would be going in line with the fundamental tenets of our shared Constitution. But again, you're not going to hear this type of analysis from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. It goes against their propagandistic campaign to smear, besmirch, and belittle a committed and proven constitutional conservative that is doing everything in his power to restore America to strict adherence to the natural law tenets that underpin our shared Constitution, and indeed the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the Constitution itself. So, we see that this sort of devious, underhanded type of gutter sniping, for lack of a better term, is being utilized against Cruz. Why? Well, it's because Cruz holds the position of frontrunner right now. And we see that the polls were wrong, and it's funny because Donald J. Trump is once again throwing a Trumper tantrum about this, claiming that that just proves that the primary vote, that the caucus vote was stolen, that it was wrong, that the people did not make their say. But Trump, little Trumpy longstockings here, Donaldus Caesar Trumpus, if you look at past election cycles, particularly with respect to presidential elections in the past, the polls have been staggeringly wrong before. If you go back to the 2006 presidential election, the fight against George W. Bush and John F. Kerry, you'll find that the polls were predicting that Kerry would have a victory. But it wasn't the case. It just wasn't the case. Not the 2006 elections, the 2004 elections, folks. Sorry, I'm getting my years confused here. But as you can see, there were these predictions made that just wound up not being true. And it was because the polls were wrong. The polls were wrong again in 2008, and they were wrong in 2012. So if you're going to put a lot of credence or credo behind polls, you're doing so at your own risk. It's, as I have repeated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, the only numbers that count are the votes. And those are the very numbers that Donaldus Caesar Trumpus is attempting to have quashed, attempting to say are illegitimate. Well, Trumpus, that's not the way that our representative Republican form of government works in this country. And quite frankly, it looks petty and childish of you on your part to be going out and whining like this. Do the country a favor. Just shut up. We're tired of your petty nonsense, your rude insults that you have lobbed all throughout this contentious election cycle thus far. We're sick and tired of it. And we will do everything to select the candidate we believe is most qualified. If you have a problem with that, that's your problem, not ours. You know, to throw these little temper tantrums, as you have been, just speaks volumes about your character, and believe me, it does not look good for you. It absolutely does not look good for you. Is there any wonder, then, that the Gallup polls for the negatives of campaigns have shown that you have the highest negatives of any presidential candidate to run in the history of that poll? So for as long as we have been recording that data and information, you yield the highest negatives. I don't think I need to say any more about that. I think that speaks volumes in and of itself sua sponte, which means, of course, in and of itself. So, we already know that with respect to the Carson incident, Carson has come out and said that no, Cruz does not deserve any blame for this, that it comes out of the CNN report, and let's face it, of all the candidates, and every one of them with respect to the caucus pressure, engaged in this sort of behavior. It's Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz that has been singled out for the reproachments by Fox News and by the various other salivating mainstream media outlets. Now, with respect to Fox, we already know that Donaldus Caesar Trumpus was mad at them because of Megyn Kelly. I mean, he's afraid of her, apparently, and that's why he refused to attend the debate, and that hurt him, because that was perceived as a slap in the face to the Iowa caucus goers. But none of that seems to matter. Trump is on this bread and circuses tour to obfuscate the truth, to distract the people from reality, and to once again be a prima donna. There is no other way to describe his outlandish, childish, feckless behavior. And it's unbecoming of anyone who is trying to vie for the highest office in the land. If he cannot hold himself in a poised, calm, and commanding demeanor, then why on earth would we want to put somebody that unstable in the highest office of the land? So, we see now that the fraudulent claims of fraud continue unabated by the critics of Senator Cruz. And I think that this is intellectually disingenuous on their part. They should cease and desist immediately, because what they are doing is a grave disservice to the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this country, we the people. The people of Iowa. Thank you for making the decision that you did. Thank you for carrying out your civic duty in record numbers. That speaks volumes. And that's all that matters. You have voted, your say counts, and we here at the Wright Flyer respect the vote and decision you made. And we would do it even if our candidate did not come in first place. That is just what intellectually honest and genuine people do. We understand that the election contest can be contentious, that the results can be narrow, and that it can sometimes not go the way of our candidate. We're certainly not going to throw these little Trumpertantrums, as is being exhibited by the New York real estate mogul, businessman, and billionaire. Honestly, how was he able to negotiate anything? I thought he was the master of the deal, the art of the deal. Now he's becoming the art of the squeal, squealing about anything that doesn't go his way like some petulant child. He's selfish, self-centered. He's just absolutely narcissistic, and he's sociopathic. He's showing all of the classic tendencies for it, and that, folks, is dangerous. It's absolutely dangerous, especially when you consider his checkered past. Now, I don't like casting aspersions at presidential candidates. I like to go off the facts. I like to use the Constitution. But let's be honest here, folks. We have seen the damage that a petulant child can cause. Look at Barack Hussein Obama and the damage that has been caused by his rogue and tyrannical regime. Do we really want to repeat the mistakes of the past? Again, folks, this is where that great adage comes in, that those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. And I think that in this great republic of ours, we should do our utmost to avoid repeating those mistakes, because they have been so disastrous, they have been so alarming, and that they have caused this country to feel the plight, pressure, and pain that it has over these last 8 years. So, Donald Trump, if you continue to keep whining in this fashion, to continue throwing out false allegations, then just know that we here at the Wright Flyer will do our utmost to keep presenting the truth. Remember, folks, the truth itself has no agenda. I don't come to this telling you that I am a purely uncommitted person. I have endorsed Ted Cruz, but I can logically explain the reasons why I did so. I have yet to see that occur from Trump or some of his supporters. In particular, I'm looking at Ann Coulter and Sarah Palin. What is wrong with you two? You look like children as well. Perhaps it's just as well, then, that you have thrown your lot in with the big crybaby from New York. Only time will tell whether that was your ultimate mistake. Now that we've discussed the story of the legal aspect of it, I want to go ahead and delve a little bit deeper into Geraldo Rivera, the very man that made the contention that Cruz has somehow violated the Iowa state law. This man is not known for his honesty. And, folks, it's just important to recall that, and I know that most of you know that, but still, let's go over a little bit of his history. I know that the Al Capone's vault story is kind of laughable in the fact that it was just an unmitigated disaster for Mr. Rivera's credibility. He hyped this story time and time again on the television, and it was made up to be some great big event, some media spectacle that would shine a light on something that the viewers would just absolutely care about. I mean, Chicago and Al Capone. These are, golden images of America's mobster past during the era of Prohibition. But it wound up being an empty vault. And just as that vault was empty, so too are the claims that Mr. Rivera made against Cruz. Now, I don't know if this is jealousy on his part, or whether he's just once again doubling down on his Fabian socialist views and outlook, but it just comes off as childish and petty. But isn't that the way it has been with most of these big-name people who have thrown their support behind the New York real estate mogul, billionaire, and businessman? Oh, and by the way, Donaldus Caesar Trumpus has the support of the second worst president of living memory, Jimmy Carter. That's something that should, not sit too well with the business icon. But here's the thing, folks. Reality is beginning to set in. Donald J. Trump has shown his cards. His trump card turns out to be a Trojan trump, and I don't think he's the type of personality that we want to put into the highest office of the land. We have already seen the unmitigated disaster that this Barack Hussein Obama regime has been for over 2 terms. Why would we wish to replace one narcissist with another? These are the serious questions that you need to be asking yourself, and of course, as always, let me reiterate that you should be doing this with a constitutional lens to determine whether or not Donaldus Caesar Trumpus is qualified to wield the reins of political power in this great representative republic of ours. Now, I do not deign myself to such a position as to tell you how to vote. I cannot tell you how to exercise your fundamental and unalienable rights, just as you cannot tell me how to exercise my fundamental and unalienable rights. That's the beautiful nature and true characteristics of our great, free, representative Republican form of government. It's how our founding fathers intended for this nation to operate going back to its inception 230 years ago. But we see that dishonesty has become a part of this 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week media circus. Bread and circuses means that entertainment value surpasses and supplants actual, honest discussion and debate over the issues and policies that are facing this country. And we need to take a step back and reflect upon this, folks, because it is our future. And the future for those up-and-coming generations, and yes, even those generations that have yet to be born, that we are discussing here. We've hit $19 trillion in debt due to out-of-control governmental spending, and all that is, once again, folks, is a warning sign from this natural law system that we have, that this government has increasingly, at all levels, divorced itself from the supreme law of the land. Now, I know that it sounds like we reiterate that far too often here at the Wright Flyer, but it is of the utmost importance and bears repeating. Article 6, Clause 2 of our shared Constitution unequivocally states that the Constitution itself serves as the supreme law of the land. And therefore, any type of decision-making that would be contrary to that or contradicts that is void ab initio, meaning void from the outset, void from the very beginning, and cannot be law. Because the law itself is the Constitution. And that is so important. And again, this is not the sort of analysis that you are going to hear from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. It goes against their propagandistic message, and as Jeremy and I have pointed out on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, they are clearly adhering to the doctrine of Joseph Goebbels and his tenets of propaganda. They repeat lies over and over and over again in the hopes that it would be true. And let's take, for instance, what Ann Coulter has been just dribbling out on her Twitter feed and Facebook feed, that Ted Cruz is not a natural-born citizen and is therefore not qualified to be the President of the United States. We've already pointed to the United States Code that has clearly refuted that, but she doesn't want to speak out to that. She doesn't want to acknowledge that because it goes against her goal of getting Donaldus Trump into the Oval Office. But folks, we, the American people, deserve far better than that. We deserve to go off of the only litmus test that counts, and that is our shared Constitution. Time and again, that is what we will repeat here at the Wright Flyer, because it is the absolute and whole truth. But again, truth doesn't seem to matter to Trump. That's why he could sit out there and say that Ted Cruz was lying about him when he said that Donaldus Caesar Trumpus's plan for health care, because after all, he comes out and says that we not only need to repeal Obamacare, but that we must also replace it. Well, in the past, he had basically given glowing accolades to Canada's socialized healthcare system. He had given glowing accolades to England's universal healthcare system. Folks, make no mistake about it, that is tantamount to socialized medicine. It would bankrupt this country, and this country is already in dire straits, economically speaking. And so it's funny that we then hear some of those who were the most adamant detractors to Obamacare, the most ardent opponents of Obamacare, coming out and supporting Donaldus Caesar Trumpus for the highest office in the land. And this I point to Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin has come out and said that she's saddened to know that Ted Cruz engaged in all of this fraud and deceitful practices in the Iowa campaign. That's a little bit of sour grapes there, Sarah. And you, of all people, should know better than to resort to those sorts of tactics, because they were utilized against you by your running mate, John McCain, when he was seeking the highest office in the land. He blamed you for losing the election. And yet, here you are, 8 years later, supporting him and supporting Donaldus Caesar Trumpus, who absolutely believes that the doctrine of eminent domain should be abused to gain private property for himself and his casinos. Again, it just shows you how self-centered he is and that he does not have the best interests of the American electorate at heart or in mind. And that should be enough to give anyone and everyone who is paying attention reason to pause. But again, we see from his little bumper sticker type of platitude of Make America Great Again, he's just basically throwing out an updated version of hope and change. Remember when Barack Hussein Obama was vying for the office back in 2008, he didn't have any substantive policy positions. He was just touting hope and change as if that would somehow be good. And the media, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, just absolutely looked at him goggle-eyed, just enamored with him, and they refused to vet him, and we have suffered the dire consequences as a direct result. But there's something to keep in mind here, folks. If Donaldus Caesar Trumpus somehow, by some wild stretch of the imagination, clinches the nomination for the gutless opposition party or GOP, the media will not handle him with kid gloves like they did with Barack Hussein Obama. They will eviscerate him. They will tear him apart, and the endless, incessant whining will commence. If he can't handle Cruz's victory in Iowa, what is he going to do when Hillary Rotten Clinton, with the full support of the salivating mainstream media, goes on the complete attack? He's not going to be able to defend himself. He's not going to be able to stand up to it. And that is troubling. This, coupled with the fact that he has the highest negatives of any presidential campaign in the history of Gallup's poll recording this, should also be a word of caution to the American electorate. And I think that the voters of Iowa were quite clear in their choice of Ted Cruz, because Donaldus Caesar Trumpus was closer to the third-place candidate that Fox News, as part of the salivating mainstream media, has been touting as some sort of victory for Marxist Rube EIEIO, was closer to him than he was to Cruz. Folks, that says all you need to know. The media has been wrong time and again. Remember, they all said that Ronald Reagan wouldn't be able to win the White House? Well, they were wrong. And I think they are equally as wrong about Cruz as they were about Reagan. But again, this sort of analysis you won't hear from the mouthpieces of Pavlov's School of Journalism. They are die-in-the-wool Fabian socialists, hell-bent on pushing forth their Fabian socialist propaganda and agenda, irrespective of the harm that it will cause to this great representative republic of ours. That is something that Jeremy and I have warned about time and time again. And folks, this is nothing new. If you go back to the magnus opum of Zygmunt Dobbs, Keynes at Harvard, he was warning of this back in the 1950s. Well, folks, our detractors, those that are of the Blame America First crowd, they are more entrenched now than ever. And they are salivating and frothing at the mouth at this grand opportunity to finally destroy the societal fabric of the United States. They are planting the seed of balkanization, as we have seen with respect to Barack Hussein Obama and his policies, and we have seen the great division that it has caused within the conservative movement. That's why I posed the question as to whether or not Donald J. Trump was a trump card or a Trojan Trump. I think after witnessing his meltdown after the Iowa decision, we see exactly who and what he is. He is no conservative, but his followers don't seem to care. But I'm going to reach an olive branch out to the supporters of Donaldus Trumpus. I'm going to say, look, you have claimed that the characteristics that you admire about the New York real estate tycoon, businessman, and reality TV star is his apparent, unwillingness to back down. Except he has flip-flopped on every position of core value right before throwing his hat in the ring. A man who has been steadily consistent, not consistently inconsistent, is Ted Cruz. He has gone before the Supreme Court 9 separate times at a very young age and defended our shared fundamental and unalienable rights. He has stood up for the Constitution, and he has won. He continued this commitment when he served as the senator for the state of Texas, my home state, and he has done everything that he said he would do. That is the type of consistency and honesty that we should be looking for with respect to the candidate for the highest office in the land. It is that type of principled conservatism that will help bring this country to a position where the people are no longer shackled by the chains of an heavy-handed, overbearing government. Because if you think about it, they are regulating us to death. That is why the economy is in such shambles. That is why we have slipped from 6th place in the Economic Freedom Index to 11th place. Folks, that has been a direct result of the disastrous regime that currently wields the reins of political power in this great country of ours. And it is not something that can be ignored. But the problem is, we see Donaldus Caesar Trumpus, who is vying for this position, for the honor of being the gutless opposition party or GOP candidate for the highest office in the land, and yet in 2009 he applauded Obama's stance with respect to the big bank bailouts, to the auto industry bailouts, and he supported his efforts to basically fundamentally transform the economy of this country. He is ultimately anti-gun. He is ultimately in favor of universal health care. And he hasn't really come out with any clear policy positions, nor has he stated how he would uphold the Constitution. Instead, we've heard the various salivating mainstream media pundits claim that he doesn't play by the rules. And we've even heard some of our own conservative information media sources and hubs say that he doesn't play by the rules. Well, that's not what we want with respect to the president. We don't want a president that is going to sit there and disregard the Constitution, because that is the sole problem. That is absolutely wherein the problem lies, because when our nation operates in a form and fashion where it increasingly divorces itself from the supreme law of the land, we witness the sort of moral decay and societal decay that we are witnessing all around us, in every proximity and in every nook and cranny of our society and civilization. That should once again, ladies and gentlemen, give you reason to pause. Now, I'm not going to go out there and say that you should vote for Ted Cruz. I will tell you that that is what I would highly suggest, but ultimately that decision rests with you. But know that the country should be held accountable for the decisions it makes, or the poor choices or good choices it makes. That's part of what it means to be an American citizen. As Jeremy and I have oft times repeated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, the popular sovereign is endowed by their creator with certain fundamental and unalienable rights, but with those fundamental and unalienable rights always couches and attaches a duty and obligation. And In this case, that duty and obligation is to proactively maintain and safeguard our fundamental and unalienable rights. If we do not act accordingly, and if we fail to do so, then we are abandoning our principles, and we are opening the floodgates to tyranny, despotism, and ultimately oppression. You see, folks, the office of president should not be a mere popularity contest. Someone like a Donaldus Caesar Trumpus may be very entertaining to watch on television, but those sorts of childish antics are not going to be good for the country. And let's not forget that he said that he wants to make deals with the Fabian socialists, such as Nancy Pelosi and dingy Harry Reid. Folks, that's part of the problem that we have right now. I thought that was part of the reason why the true conservative movements were so outraged with respect to what the detente wing of the gutless opposition party did in this midterm election of 2014. They made all these grandiose promises, and they have failed to live up to even a single one of them. Now, folks, that is not something we can ignore. That is not something that can just easily be resolved or swept under a rug to be thought of on another day. That is absolutely something that needs to be addressed. And then for Sarah Palin to go out and attack Ted Cruz just shows that she has given up her principles in entirety. She has lost all credibility, and that is a glaring shame. You know, Sarah, I stood up for you for a long time. But as the years wore on, I saw that you were really not committed to the conservative principles that you paid lip service to. I see that it's to the highest bidder. So what were you offered? What did the hairpiece offer you to make you abandon your so-called principles? Is it because you feel a certain affinity to him, because you both were on reality TV shows? Well, folks, again, that is not what we should be using as a litmus test to determine who the next president of the United States ought to be. That is sheer insanity and madness. But that appears to be the type of platitude-ridden campaign slogans that we're seeing today. And her attack on Cruz is shameful. Absolutely shameful. And I think she owes him an apology. But of course, does she have the characteristic to be like Cruz, who did apologize for something that he didn't even do wrong? To Ben Carson. And let me applaud Ben Carson for actually finally coming out and saying that no, Cruz was not to blame for this, although there are now reports coming out that he knew about this all along. Let's be honest, folks. Let's look at the facts and the truth in a constitutional framework, because that is what our founding fathers called upon us as popular sovereigns to do. That is our duty and obligation in order to enjoy our fundamental and unalienable rights. We cannot just let this become a new norm in this country, because it is establishing a dangerous precedent that will only make these election contests all the more specious. And the reason that I say this is because when you see that there is no serious policy decisions or positions on the part of Donaldus Trumpus, and you see that someone who is truly committed to upholding our shared Constitution come under a relentless attack, it shows you that there is the corruption that people are angry with. But do not just let your anger be blind, because if you act and react based on raw emotionalism or on a desire to seek vengeance against the system that has let you down, it allows you to be manipulated by strong men who are operating with ulterior motives in mind. You know, folks, I cannot stress enough just how important it is that we remain steadfast and stalwart in our defense of the Constitution. You know, it's as Jeremy and I have said before, the most important birthright and the greatest birthright of any people on the face of this planet is our Constitution. But we are the watchmen. We are the ones that will be held accountable by the annals of history should we fail to stand up for and defend that great birthright. We must be the gatekeeper to ensure that we do not allow the enemy within to seize the reins of political power. We see that has already happened with Barack Hussein Obama, and we have seen the horrific consequences that resulted therefrom. That is why I implore you, just approach this with an open mind. Look into it, study it, research it, apply your own faculties and senses to it to make the proper determination. Because, as you can see, based on the art of the squeal, Donaldus Caesar Trumpus is already attempting to deprive the voters of Iowa of their voice, and that is shameful. That is beyond ludicrous. It is beyond deceitful. And it should absolutely not be tolerated. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb here, folks, and demand that Donald J. Trump apologize to the voters of Iowa. How dare he insult their intelligence? How dare he attack them? Well, it's not the first time he's done it. He's come out and said just how stupid are the people of Iowa in the past. Well, the people of Iowa are a damn sight smarter than what you're giving them credit for, Donaldus. Quit your Trumpertantrums. Quit all of this childish whining, all of this sycophantic nonsense. We don't want another narcissist wielding the reins of political power in this great representative republic of ours. We are ready for a principled leader who will stand up for our shared Constitution, because at the end of the day, it is the key to solving all of the political problems that face this country. Now, unlike Trump, or his followers, I do not believe that Cruz is a Messiah. The only Messiah there's ever been is the biblical one of Jesus. And I'm not going to hold Cruz onto that same platform. But I will say this. He will open the doors and remove the chains and shackles that are holding back the true arbiters and wielders of sovereignty in this country, the popular sovereigns, we the people. And it will be we the people who save this country. We are the only ones endowed with that sort of authority, and we were endowed with that sort of authority by our Creator. That is what our founding fathers fully recognized. Look at the writings of George Mason, particularly with respect to the Declaration of Rights for the state of Virginia, and you will have the answer as to what it is that makes this country great, and what it is that allowed this country to reach such lofty heights in its relatively short yet illustrious history. Folks, history is a great teacher. It is not something to be ignored. And if we fail to learn from our past, we are doomed to repeat the mistakes of that past. But I know that I have faith in the American people. I have faith in our natural law system, the natural order of things as they have been since the inception of this country. And I wholeheartedly believe that we can recapture that, reclaim that, and set this country back on the proper course. Should we fail to do so, history will not be kind to us in her harsh judgments. The up-and-coming generations, and indeed the generations yet to be born, will look upon us with a negative yet scrupulous eye and demand to know why we failed them. Now, folks, again, I'm not telling you how to vote. All I ask is that you examine the facts, examine the candidates with a constitutional framework, because in so doing you will discover the truth, and the truth is what will set us free, because the truth has no agenda. So ask yourselves, what positions has Donald Trump held consistently? Not consistently, inconsistently, but actually consistently with respect to the Constitution. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say none. But his record's out there for us all to see. It's not hidden away. It's there. You can find it. And that's the beauty of the internet. The internet has opened that door to us. So it is there for us all to find. Please, look at it from the constitutional framework and empower yourself with that knowledge. Well, folks, just when you thought this thing couldn't get any worse than it already did with respect to being a worthless soap opera, Governor Terry Branstad of Iowa, the longest-serving governor, the one that broke with tradition by ending his neutrality, is now claiming in a Radio Iowa piece that Ted Cruz ran an old-fashioned 99-county campaign that yielded victory, but he is joining the chorus of people criticizing Cruz for questionable campaign tactics. Now, folks, as I've already stated from the outset of this program, Cruz didn't utilize any tactics differently than any of the other campaigns, than any of the other camps there. This is just despicable. It goes to show that the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, has set Senator Cruz in their sights because they know he is a dedicated constitutional originalist. This sort of whining, this sort of duplicitous action clearly demonstrates the reason why there are so many Americans who are fed up with the political system here in the United States. Governor Branstad, I'm going to go out on a limb here and demand that you make a public apology to Cruz. Man up and be as good as Cruz was to apologize to Carson for something that he didn't even do wrong. You know, context is so important in everything, ladies and gentlemen, and we can see here that this selective reporting of information by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media shows that they are desperate to change the outcome. And they're just doubling down on their efforts to attack Cruz. And again, this goes to that whole thing of what I described as Cruz derangement syndrome, or CDS. Clearly, Governor Branstad seems to be suffering from that as well. He said that he thought Trump, by skipping the debate, hurt himself. That's true. But he really thought that Cruz had been pushing for a strong sense of fairness, or, was moving against fairness in Iowa. That he himself is for a strong sense of fairness in Iowa. And he said disturbing information that was not true about a candidate right at the time people are voting in the caucuses is an inappropriate thing. Well then, Branstad, why didn't you go after Marxist Rube EIEIO, Donaldus J. Trump, and El Jefe? Because they were all engaged in these tactics too. So I am beyond annoyed with the governor and the state government of Iowa in the way that they have been acting throughout this entire ordeal. And I think that it's time for the good people of Iowa to consider replacing your governor. Clearly, he is not being objective, he is not being neutral, he is not allowing you to have your say. He is joining the Trumpster diver in trying to take away your voice. Because this sort of twisted machination that's being put forth is all an attempt to discredit Cruz, to take him out of the running because they do not like his policy. Governor Branstad believes that Iowa can only survive if they are the recipient of government subsidies. Well, folks, why is it that the federal government is so large? Why is it that we have hit a point of $19 trillion in debt? It's because of this type of selfish approach from people like Terry Branstad. And he's not doing the American people any services here. He's not doing us any favors. He is trying to play kingmaker, and I find that despicable. He's basically assumed a position of anyone but Cruz. And I can say that with clear confidence because he outwardly went in front of the cameras of the salivating mainstream media and implored for his people not to vote for Cruz. Now, as you've noticed in this episode and indeed in past episodes, I have gone out of my way to state that I am not attempting to tell you how to vote, because it is not my right or my place as a popular sovereign to tell other popular sovereigns how to vote. Terry Branstad is not acting in that way. He is violating that sacred principle of our representative republic, and that is troubling. The reason it's troubling is it shows that he is acting in an intellectually disingenuous fashion, that he is attempting to double down on the type of tired backroom politics that the American people detest, and it has no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States. Governor Branstad, you not only owe Ted Cruz an apology, you owe all of the good and decent constituents of the Hawkeye State a robust apology, because they turned out in record numbers and voted their conscience. And I'm tired of all of these little whining sycophants trying to silence the voice of the good people of the state of Iowa. How dare you, sir, how dare you go out and make a mockery of this great republic of ours? How dare you act in the same manner and fashion as Barack Hussein Obama? The American people are tired of it. And there will be a day of reckoning for the sort of outlandish attacks and mischaracterizations and slander that you're throwing out there. You know, folks, if I sound angry, it's because I am. It's this sort of duplicitous behavior that has helped push this country towards the brink of ruination and destruction, and it is detrimental to each and every one of us. It is all an effort to deprive us of our voice, to make it to where the central authority is the end-all and be-all with everything. Shame on you, Governor Branstad. Shame on you, Sarah Palin. Shame on you, Jerry Rivers, Geraldo Rivera. But I have a feeling that neither and none of you have a sense of shame. None of you have a moral compass. That is why you are playing this game of political kabuki theater. But the people see through it. The people absolutely see through it. We're tired of the whining. We're tired of the theatrics. We want a realist. We want to return to the natural law tenets that underpin this great nation of ours, and we want all levels of government, whether it be the federal government, the state government, county governments, right down to the city and municipal governments, to strictly adhere not only to the United States Constitution, but the various constitutions of the several states. And the reason that we want that is because that is the position that we will have to take in order to get this country back on track. Every problem that we are facing in this country right now can be directly attributed to this departure from the Constitution. But once again, the Constitution itself absolutely is the supreme law of the land. And it cannot be ignored, it cannot be besmirched, and it cannot be belittled, nor can it be antiquated or outdated, because the natural law tenets that underpin it are absolutely timeless. It is that timeless attribute of the natural law tenets that have made our Constitution the longest-lasting, continuous constitutional document in all of world history. Folks, do you realize how monumental and staggering that really is? It speaks volumes about the genius of our founding fathers. Why, then, would we stoop to the petty factionalism that George Washington warned us of in his farewell address? If we do not come to terms with everything that is happening right now, then we are going to plunge this country over the edge, and I fear to see what would happen. Because I love this country. I love the system of laws in this country. I love what our foundational image was all about. And it pains me to see that this country has been driven so far away from the original intent of our founding fathers, because it goes to show that the Fabian socialists have poisoned not only the minds of the up-and-coming generations, but they have infiltrated the media, which was supposed to be the watchdog for the American people. The reason we even have an independent press is to prevent the government from becoming either tyrannical or oppressive. But they have become the lapdog, particularly with this Barack Hussein Obama regime. And that has led to increased frustration, increased disenfranchisement by the American people from their government. And then you see that both parties are running out to push illegal aliens into this country, to legalize them. That's why I find Marxist Rube EIEIO so intolerable. His Gang of Eight bill was nothing short of a complete and total betrayal of the American people. And while Rush Limbaugh might say that he is not a part of the establishment, I'm going to go out and say that he absolutely is a die-in-the-wool member of the détente wing of the gutless opposition party. And even if he is not, he is so weak and feckless that he will be pushed and controlled by the détente wing, thereby continuing this path of collaboration. Now, it may be a slower push towards Fabian socialism, but mark my words, if Rubio gets the nod, it will be a continued slide towards Fabian socialism. The problems will not be addressed, and the Constitution will not be held as the central tenet of his campaign, nor of his proposed administration. Folks, that is the danger that we are facing as a nation right now. We have been pushed towards the precipice time and again, and it has been to our great detriment. So we can either make the decision now to embrace our Constitution again, to move away from the failed policies that have put us in the predicament that we face now, or we can continue with the status quo and watch our country slide further off the cliff towards the abyss of ruination and destruction, to hold down the American people while promoting non-citizens who didn't enter the country under the auspices of the law. It makes a complete farce of what it is to be an American. It tears apart the meaning of the old adage that the United States is a nation of laws, not of men. The law applies equally to all American citizens. But charlatans, frauds, and liars have been able to weave the tale of balkanization into the hearts and minds of the American people. It is weakening the popular sovereigns so that those who do not deserve it, and those who are diametrically opposed to the foundational image and natural law tenets of this great country, can move forward with their twisted agenda. Folks, I'll repeat again that is the last thing that we need to have happen in this country when we have a principled constitutional conservative running for office. We should be giving him our support. Now, I'm not going to say that you should be forced to vote for him, and I'm not going to tell you how to vote. I'm just explaining my reasoning here, and I believe that my reasoning is founded in good rationality and logic. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Therefore, I want the candidate that will best stand up for the Constitution, best govern within the confines of the Constitution, and thus far the only candidate vying for the office of President of the United States, as I speak into this microphone right here and right now, is Ted Cruz. He fits that in every way. Mark Levin calls him a conservative. Rush Limbaugh calls him a conservative. He is a conservative. And it's why I am so shocked at people like Sarah Palin and Ann Coulter that have seemed to have just leapt off the deep end, plunging into the abyss for a person who has been a progressive for all of his adult life. Now, folks, progressives are nothing more than ardent adherents to Fabian socialist policies and to the Trump supporters. You say that it was just for business. Okay. But how is that going to be good for the country? To further compromise on liberty, to further compromise on our sovereignty, that is a reckless position to take. And before you tell me that he is absolutely for ending the torrent of illegal aliens that are pouring through our porous southern border, let me remind you that in 2013 he said that there is no way that we could send them all back, that there is no way that we could close the border, and therefore we should just let them have a path to legalization. Folks, he was either lying then, or he's lying now, or he is incapable of telling the truth. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he's lying now. But in all actuality, he's probably lying every time his mouth moves. Now, I'm not doing that to cast aspersions on the man, nor do I begrudge him the fact that he is a billionaire. That is truly remarkable. That is laudable. That is something that all Americans should strive to achieve. But he is not consistent. He is consistently inconsistent on all of the points where it matters. He has come out and said that he would support putting his sister on the Supreme Court. And remember, folks, that is why this election is so pivotal, because there is a potential for 4 Supreme Court nominees to be selected in this election. Wouldn't you want a president who would pick and select and appoint candidates for the Supreme Court who are ardent followers of the Constitution? Look what happens when we don't do that. Look what happens when those who do not adhere to the Constitution outnumber those who do. We get disastrous decisions like the so-called Affordable Care Act, not once but twice. Chief Justice John Roberts has plunged this country into further chaos because he has attempted to legislate from the bench. That is not an authority or power specifically and expressly enumerated to the Supreme Court by our Constitution. Article 3 of the Constitution did not give the Supreme Court the authority to rewrite statutes. The sole authority for legislation is endowed into and enumerated unto the legislative branch of government pursuant to Article 1, Section 8. You see, folks, again, this clearly demonstrates why it is so important for us all to have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and unalienable rights. Because when we do that, it makes it all the easier to spot those who are not really keeping the best interests of the United States at heart. It allows us to discover this truth and to push for those types of positions that would absolutely benefit the country and the people. You know, the Founding Fathers completely distrusted centralized authority. And that makes complete and total sense when you recall that the long, drawn-out, bloody affair that was our War of Independence was rooted in a fight against the centralized authority of the most powerful military force known to man, Great Britain. And these supposed upstart colonists gambled. They risked everything, right down to their sacred honor, which was the most important thing to them, to stand up to the tyranny and oppression of the British Crown and to build a new nation based on the revolutionary principle that the people are the ultimate wielders of sovereignty. Folks, we are on the brink of losing that aspect of our character. We are faced with a dilemma here, because we have a true choice that will start this country back onto the corrective path, to allow the people to rise up and take their country back, and we have somebody who has not been clear on his positions, someone who throws a temper tantrum and seeks to silence the vote of the people because he perceived it as going against him, because it did go against him. And because it went against him, that supposedly means that he is absolutely in charge of beginning to say who can or cannot be the wielders of sovereignty in this country. That is dangerous. It just shows they don't care about the popular sovereigns. And folks, that's the most important thing. When it comes to the way that this government is meant to operate, and the way that our founding fathers intended for it to operate, it all comes down to we the people. And for Governor Branstad to come out and cast aspersions as he has, not once, but twice, that is beyond the pale. That is complete and total intellectual disingenuousness. And the people of Iowa deserve better than that. So, Branstad, I want you to apologize to the people of Iowa. I want you to apologize to Senator Cruz. I want you to apologize to Ben Carson. Because what you are trying to do here is to continue to pit the conservatives against one another at the expense of the people. That is intolerable. It's unacceptable. And you know better. Because I remember when you were up on Fox News, you touted yourself as being one of the longest reigning governors in Iowa's history. So you've been around long enough to know that you shouldn't engage in that sort of behavior and conduct, but you allowed your political views, your aspirations, to get in the way of the only people who count, we the people. That should never occur. That is not what a true leader does. And you have let your people down. And I say this with the utmost respect, because I respect the office that you hold. And I would have thought that you would be of such a caliber that you would respect it as well. But I can see that that is a mistaken point of view on my part, because you're absolutely going out in the forefront and setting a horrific example. And the people of Iowa I am sure, will not think all that highly of what you were doing. And as for Donald Trump calling for a recount, calling for a redo, stop it. Stop being a child. The American people see through your little antics there. We do not want another spoiled child wielding the reins of political power in this country again. We've had enough of that for the past 8 years to fill us for a lifetime. You are part of the problem. And the way that you are casting aspersions and attacks upon your fellow Republicans is disgusting. I haven't seen you exert that much energy on your Democrat rivals. Sure, you've thrown a few zingers at them here and there, ha, but never to the extent or for the prolonged period or with the great intensity that you have struck out at your opponents in your own party. That is truly disgusting. And it makes me once again question whether you have the wherewithal or the character or the candor to be President of the United States. You know, this isn't some reality TV show. It's not some little game. You may view it as a game, but Donaldus Caesar Trumpus, let me reiterate that the United States Constitution is not up for sale, that our people are not to be your subjects. We're not your employees. You are seeking to become our employee. And therefore, you need to act with the candor and with the grace that is required of that position and of that office. But I'm not seeing that from you. I haven't seen it from you this entire heated and contentious election cycle. And quite frankly, I'm sick and tired of the whining and the complaining and the bombastic boasts that have no place in an open and honest society like the United States. We are the American people. We are the wielders of sovereignty in this country, and I don't think you either grasp the gravity of that or the reality of it. Certainly, Sarah Palin has forgotten it, and Ann Coulter, I don't know what she believes anymore. I don't know that she knows what she believes, and that is truly tragic. We here in the United States of America have the opportunity to set this country back onto the path to prosperity. And yet we are forced to go through these childish theatrics and antics like some poorly scripted soap opera. Well, enough is enough. The American people absolutely deserve better than this. And I think that it's just more in the same of the type of behavior that hurt you in Iowa, like skipping that debate. I still recall you going in front of the cameras of the salivating mainstream media and then furiously typing with those stubby thumbs of yours about how your ratings would be huge and that your huge ratings would outdo Fox. Didn't happen. In fact, it came back to bite you in the posterior, didn't it, Mr. Trump? So, now that you are faced with those realities, it is time for you to start respecting the people. Stop calling to silence the voices of the people of Iowa who came out in record numbers, shattering every record that had ever existed, to voice their opinion. We are more politically involved today because we know just how serious and important this entire election cycle is. And you're making a farce of it, sir. You are making a joke of it. You are hurting conservatism. But is that your goal? And has that been your goal all along? and is Governor Branstad and all of those who are jumping in and taking off the objectivity and disregarding tradition? Is that what they are seeking to achieve as well? To push this country further off the cliff, over into the abyss of tyranny, despotism, and oppression? Because if that is the case, the American people will not tolerate it. And you need to go away if that is the case. But I, again, am not telling the people how to vote. I never will, nor do I desire to. Folks, I'm just pointing it out as I see it. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol, so please, folks, enjoy yourself. As always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer, and I look forward to seeing you the next time that Jeremy and yours truly take over the friendly airwaves, flying you over them in comfort and style, all while leaving you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment, unlike any other radio program or venue. And I also invite you to leave comments either here on our YouTube page or on our Facebook page or our Google Plus page, and be sure to follow us on Twitter, folks, at Radio Aviation X. That again is at Radio Aviation EX. And let us know what you think. We'll see you next time. Do take care, folks.